Welcome into a special edition of Inside Carolina Podcast. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. As always, special guest today, Bill Robinson. If the name is familiar, it's because you probably have a book or you've been to Carolina Basketball School. Bill, I appreciate you joining the show. And I want to ask, and I've read it, and I encourage everybody to read it, and we'll talk about some of the great moments in the book, but why the book? Why now?
Yeah, it's something I never wanted to do. Actually, my mentor, Norm Wilhelm, wrote a book called "The Sweet Smell of Pine: How to Coach the Bench." There was never a book out there about coaching the bench. He said it was the worst experience of his life writing that book. And I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'll never write a book. I've got no interest at all to write a book." But it was 7 years ago, standing at midcourt in the Smith Center during camp, and I'm running the main gym, and Hubert Davis is one of my guys working, and Sean May and Kendall Marshall and three high school coaches that have all won state championships. And I thought, man, the knowledge that's in this room right now, the basketball knowledge, the stories that are in this room. If I asked everybody what their favorite story was, what their favorite drill was about camp, it would make a pretty cool book. And that's kind of how it got started. Then the following year, as camp was getting started, um, in the coaches meeting, Roy Williams started talking about Frank Fuqua and the influence that Frank Fuqua had had on camp and on him as a coach. And I looked around the room and I said, nobody here knows who Frank Fuqua is anymore. And I don't want that name to die. And nobody else is going to have maybe the interest or the motivation to do this book, but I felt like I needed to do it just to keep Frank Fuqua's name alive, to keep the stories alive of Carolina camp. But ultimately, I wanted people to know that Carolina is different, not just camp, but Carolina as a program is just different than other programs. And there's so many great stories and a couple crazy stories that happened. I had Dean Smith, Roy Williams, and Tyler Hansbrough in my gym with 10-year-olds in the same night. And when I tell that story, people are like, "Man, you need to write a book." And I thought, well, maybe I do. But as a college basketball coach, I don't have a whole lot of time. So what it ended up doing is I'd write some stories. The season would start. I'd literally take the book, put it on a shelf in my closet, wait till the season ended, got the book out, read the story. Some of it didn't make sense and have to rewrite stuff and then get started again and do a couple interviews, write a couple more, chapters, and then put the book back on the shelf again. So it took me 6 years before I finally got it done. And it hit Amazon back in August of 2024. So that's where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to bring up the cover so folks can see what we're talking about. Carolina Basketball School history, stories, and drills. And I think this picture sort of sums up the cover that you chose. Sort of sums up the camp, right? It has been going on forever, and you have Roy Williams there. You have kids playing, and that's the cool thing when you talk about different at North Carolina and North Carolina basketball, and specifically this North Carolina basketball camp, is everybody's involved. It doesn't matter whether you're a walk on that played in quote unquote garbage minutes or you were one of the stars of the show and one of the legendary players. You've mentioned Tyler Hansbrough. There's other stories in this book about Jordan and Ford and just everybody involved. But when you look at it, compiling them, and that's something I wanted to ask you because you have some obscure stories that are great. You have some that I've heard. How did you decide what to include and what not to include? Because it's a pretty easy read, and if you're a Carolina basketball fan, there's a ton of information in there that you're going to eat up. But it could have been three, four, five, 10 times longer because of the nature of the camp. Just how did you decide what's in, what's out?
Yeah, some of it's just personal stuff. Obviously, the cover is really cool, but what you don't know about it is that young man dribbling the basketball um, is one of my former players' sons. And when he was born, I was actually in the hospital the day he was born. Got to see him before he even got home with his parents. And now he's 16 years old. He's going to be at my camp here at Milligan on July 21st in a couple weeks, in a month. So even there's so many stories that just seem like they pop up. And again, had long interviews with some great coaches like Joe Kruk. And just, man, you talk an hour and it take me a week just to be able to decipher what I could, what I didn't, and I'd run it by some of my people, some of my assistants, my wife, my mom, my sister. They all would read the stories and say, "Yeah, that's a good. No, that's not it. Yeah, well, you need to rewrite that." But the whole idea is, if you came to camp next week, sat down with us at lunch, Granville Towers cafeteria, and you sat around with a bunch of old coaches and just listened to them tell stories. That's what I wanted the book to be. So that's kind of how that was my criteria. If this is something that you would hear at lunch, then hey, let's add that to the book. If it's not something you would hear at lunch, then we don't put it. Obviously, we want it to be very positive. I ran everything through Coach Williams. Uh, was it 2022 national tournament and in New Orleans? I had a kind of a packet of stories that I brought and just gave it to him, and, and I wanted him to be at least I'm not involved, but at least informed of what was going on. I didn't want anything to be anything that was critical. I didn't want anything to jeopardize obviously my opportunity to go back to camp because it's the best time. It's obviously the best time. I love it. I got calls last night from guys saying, "Hey, when you coming in? When you get there? Let's get together. Let's make sure we connect as soon as we get there." So, but just being able to develop friendships with coaches and even former players, guys like Pete Chilcutt, and I have gotten to get to know each other really well, and just hey, let's make sure we get at least one night where we can just hang out. So it's like going back to college again, but only for 10 days and not having to do any academic work.
Yeah, it gets no better than that. And staying at Granville Towers, when I was at Carolina, I stayed at Granville. I graduated in '93, which obviously was a good year to graduate. And I remember the camps going on and having everything at West and having all the players. And I remember the structure of it all. And you talk about that a lot. Um, and I'm going back up here in a second, but I do want to talk about Coach Guthridge and the structure. And one thing, uh, hardcore Carolina fans and even not so hardcore Carolina fans understand who Bill Guthridge is and was and what he meant. But when you talk about what he was and what he meant, specifically the Carolina basketball school, uh, structure is a major thing. When you have a bunch of young kids ranging in ages running around, you've got to get them everywhere they need to be. Just from your experience, uh, Coach Guthridge was just. I mean, if everybody could have Coach Guthridge that planned their day and planned their life, I don't think you could have a much better mentor and an understanding of time management and things like that and what's important with Coach Guthridge.
No, he was incredible. We still use the same bus schedule that he developed, all the gyms and everything. He had that all scheduled down. The actual uh, packet of information that we get with the drills and the timings and all that stuff is still his. Coach Williams took it to Kansas. They were still doing Bill Guthridge stuff in the schedule when Coach Williams was at Kansas. I mean, that's how good the information was and how well done it was. And they basically just make copies every year and just it's the same plan. Now the game has changed, and we have adapted to different things and tried to make it a little bit more modern. But the reality is, Coach Smith, he was obviously Coach Smith. He ran it was his program, but behind the scenes, it was Bill Guthridge doing everything. And one of the most emotional memories I have was working in the Smith Center, and I'm doing a station, and all of a sudden I heard the gym just go dead silent and turn around, and I was the furthest basket away from the tunnel. And I look back, and they had wheeled Coach Guthridge in a wheelchair, and it shut down camp. Everybody went over, and obviously we paid our respects to him, and he was not doing well. It was the last time I saw him in person. So obviously, um, you know, Carolina basketball is Dean Smith, but it's in my opinion, he's just as much Bill Guthridge.
Absolutely. Talking with Bill Robinson, Carolina Basketball School History, Stories, and Drills. A great book if you're a Carolina fan. We'll talk about how to get it and how to meet Bill here in a little bit. But Bill, let's back up a little bit. Okay. I was researching you a little, and you included in the book your first game for North Carolina was the Cincinnati. I referenced '93 when I graduated. So I remember this game specifically. And I went to school with these guys, used to sit at Granville breakfast back when all these guys were freshmen. But just talk about your first experience as Carolina guy and how you got ingrained in this and how this all came about to be a part of Carolina Basketball School. Because it is welcoming, but it's exclusive. And like you mentioned in the book, once you're in, you're in. And you're very much in. How did it all start?
Yeah, I grew up in New Jersey. We didn't really root for colleges. My dad grew up 7 miles from Rutgers, and he still was not a Rutgers fan. I grew up, rooting for the Yankees and growing up for the Sixers. I grew up an hour from Philly, so um, I ended up I went to college in New York, got my master's in Texas, did my internship with the Mavericks when Jason Kidd was a player. Moved to North Carolina outside Asheville, Montrose College, in 1997, and recruited a local kid who was his name was Jesse Gardner, probably the best, most complete guard that I've ever coached. And local kid from Owen High School. People know the name Owen High School. They know that's where Coach Williams started his coaching career. Well, he coached a guy named Porky Spencer. Porky was the track coach at Owen and coached Jesse Gardner. So through Jesse, I got to know Porky, and Porky invited me to go to Kansas to work camp. And at the time, my kids were like 9, 7, and 5. Now, like I can't leave my wife for 2 weeks in the summer to go to Kansas. But then when Coach Williams got the job at Carolina, Porky basically said, "What's your excuse now?" I said, "I don't have an excuse. What do I need to do?" And he said, "Email this guy. His name is CB McGrath. He runs camp. He'll get you in. Tell him that you're the guy I told him about." So I emailed CB, and he emailed me right back almost immediately saying, "Sorry, we're full. No room." Ran into Jesse later that day. He said, "I hear you're working camp with Porky." I said, "I didn't get in." He said, "Did you tell Porky?" I said, "Why would I tell Porky? It's full." I get an email the next day saying, "We got an opening for you if you'd like to come to Carolina camp." And Jesse called Porky. Porky called Coach Williams. Coach Williams called CB, and I've been working camp ever since. They stuck me in a gym with Coach Mac Herndon. Mac was one of Coach Williams' roommates from camp back when Coach Williams was a GA. So Mac just worked his 50th year.
Wow.
So I think they put me with Mac to make sure that I didn't screw up and to make sure, hey, let's find out who this young kid is. And I've been working camp ever since and been gym head most of the time. I went through a stretch when Hubert first came. He didn't want to be a gym head, but they wanted him to be a gym head. But he didn't want to have the responsibilities of a gym head, but they wanted him to be the name of a gym head. So they would name him the gym head, but then put me with him, and then I would do all the little things that gym head has to do to make sure you're on schedule and doing what you're supposed to. And Hubert just loved being with the kids. He just wanted to play with the kids, and he would lose track of time. But that's how I got into it. And once you do a good job, they keep asking you to come back. So I feel really blessed to have the opportunity, and it's all because of Porky Spencer. And there's a great chapter about Porky in the book and his relationship with Coach Williams. Porky dad was a truck driver, was never around. So who picks you up and takes you home from practice? Your head coach, and his head coach happened to be Roy Williams, and they still have a love you man relationship. I mean, if you ever see Coach at a game, it's Coach Williams, Wanda, Coach Guthridge's wife, and Porky. That's who sits in the front row. They're up in that little section when he comes to home games, and you see Porky there all the time. I don't think he's missed a game. If Coach Williams is going to be there, Porky's going to be there too.
Yeah, if you know Porky and you're friends with Porky, you can get um, you can get those benefits. It's like you mentioned, it's a great relationship there, and it's another point about Carolina basketball and the people is that once you're in, you're in, and he's definitely in, and you had that opportunity. I want to get deeper into the book. And understand, let folks understand that this is a big camp. There are gyms all over the area. We mentioned the bus schedule. You have to drive all over. You got to get these kids to the spots and have the opportunities. But just exactly how stressful is it, and how was it before you really got into it? Knowing who was above you, knowing who was creating the schedule, knowing whose name was not on the Carolina basketball school. That's something else we'll talk about. But notice the names involved in this school and how important it was for everybody and how big time it was. How stressful was it at first for you?
It was extremely stressful, and it was more stressful um, when Coach Williams was running it compared to now. Things have changed a lot. And we talk about NIL, we talk about transfer, we talk about all this other stuff. All that's changed camp for the worse. And I don't want to be negative, but we just don't get to know the kids as much. But when Coach Williams was running it, he would come to every gym every day. When Steve Robinson was his assistant, you guarantee that he would walk in at some point. Now, Joe Holiday, he would come in and want to hang out, and he's a wonderful human being, and he was a lot of fun to be around and just very kind. Steve Robinson came in, you felt like he was coming to check and make sure that you were on point and on schedule and everything was going well. And if it wasn't going exactly perfectly the way he wanted to go, he would tell you. And he scared me. I told him this. We became friends later on in life, but he would literally scare me every time he walked in the gym. I was scared to death. And There's a story in the book. One day Coach Williams walked in, and I'm a gym head, with 11-year-old kids, and making sure that everybody's where they're supposed to be. And I looked at this court, and they were doing what they were doing. I looked at this court, and they were doing what they were supposed to. We're doing team play. Then I look back at my court. We're not worried because I'm sure I'm doing a good job. I'm sure my court's fine. Well, it was the first morning we had just taught the kids how to schedule, how to substitute. You got 7 guys on the team, 1 through 5 start. 6 and 7 come in for 1 and 2. 1 and 2 come in for 3 and 4. Well, the kids had screwed it up, and Coach Williams was standing next to me. All of a sudden, he goes, Billy. And I'm like, what? He goes, when did we start playing 6-on-6? And my kids had screwed up, and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get fired. And there's a chapter on, I'm so getting fired for this from guys who did things. We all thought, at one point or another, we're going to get fired, because that's the type of intensity. That's the type of, care that we had. We never wanted to screw up. You never wanted to do anything that would disappoint, obviously, Coach Smith, for those older guys, Coach Guthridge, or I just didn't ever want to do anything to get Coach Williams mad. And I have, but he's forgiven me. So it's just part of it. The last time he was really mad at me was about shot selection. He was mad that my 11-year-old kids had bad shot selection in camp. I'm not sure that that's something I could fix in 2 or 3 days, but it's something that made a point to me, and I made sure that we talk about it every day at camp now.
Yeah, for folks that think that it's just a summer camp where you just go and have fun and play a little basketball, no, it's not like that at Carolina basketball camp. It is a learning experience, and it is taken that way from the top down, and that's hilarious. Shot selection for 11-year-olds. That is, yeah. Let's talk about some of the stories, and we're going to talk about the camp games in a little bit, but some of your stories, and folks that, again, if you've never been to Carolina basketball camp, or if you don't really understand, you have age ranges, but just like in sports, you can play up or you get moved up. And you've got a story about Doug Moe and James Worthy that I thought was funny. Just relay that to our listeners and our watchers, because James Worthy, to me, is as highly rated as he is as a Carolina player. I still think he's underrated for how good he really was. But tell the story.
Yeah, I have 2 really fun James Worthy stories. One, they were Coach Smith walked in the gym, and they were just running the kids, and the coach who was running the main gym said, Coach Smith went to him and said, "Hey, well, why are we running?" He said, "Well, the kids are just not doing what I asked them to do." And he basically said, "You see that young man over there?" And he said, "Yeah, the tall one, yeah." He said, "That's the number 1 player in the country. That's James Worthy. There'll be no more running this week." And they said, "Yes, sir." And that's just kind of the way Coach Smith was. But back to the story you're referring to, yeah, Doug Moe saw him. I think it was in 8th grade, and he was at one of the lower gyms, because it's all based on ages. It's not really until they get there, they don't know exactly how talented they are. So after the first morning, they have move ups. You just meet in the cafeteria, you go to whoever's running camp and say, "Hey, this kid needs to move up," or we'd like to move these 2 kids up, or we don't move kids down, obviously, but if you want to stay, you want kids to be able to play in an area where they're not bored and they don't have anxiety. So you find that middle ground, so they feel good about it. And Coach Moe came in and said, "Hey, this kid needs to move up to the pros." And Coach Guthridge was like, "That's like 5 gyms, 4 or 5 gyms. You're skipping a whole bunch of kids." He said, "Coach, you need to move this kid all the way up to the pros. He can play there. You need to offer him a scholarship immediately, and this kid's going to be an NBA player someday." And sure enough, it was James Worthy, and he was absolutely right. Still hard for Coach Guthridge to skip, 4 or 5 gyms, because they never did that. They would never do that, and nobody's ever been worthy except for James Worthy.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, Worthy, I still think, and obviously I remember him at Carolina. I still think he's underrated, and he was a badass too, and he didn't take much stuff, and to this day he does not. Talking with Bill Robinson again about the Carolina Basketball School book. Of course, we're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Bill, a couple others, and I want you to tell whatever stories you want to tell, but there was some that stuck out for me. And this is another one of those things that sort of sticks out for Carolina, that everybody's treated the same in camp, on the roster, on the teams, and it's Wes Miller and Ty Lawson going at it. And everybody, this day and age, everybody talks about Wes Miller and coaching and all that stuff, but Wes Miller is another one of those guys that was a difficult player to deal with on the basketball court. in a variety of reasons, but he was a bulldog. Just sort of talk about that story of him and Lawson going at it, because Ty Lawson, I think, also, and it's probably blasphemy, but I think Ty Lawson's he's got a case for the best point guard ever at Carolina. And before anybody comes at me, I understand. But tell the Wes Miller and Ty Lawson story.
And one of the coolest interviews I did was being able to go to Joe Holiday's house and just sit on his front porch and rocking the rocking chairs with just the two of us and talk. And he talked about recruiting Wes Miller. They went to see Rashad McCants, and Wes Miller happened to be on the team, and he fell in love with Wes just because what you talked about, just the competitiveness and the bulldog and the ability to make shots. And that's who Wes Miller is, just so competitive. So yeah, just one night, Wes back up. They give us the opportunity at 10 o'clock to every night during camp to watch pickup. We literally just pick up a chair, sit next to the court, and get to watch. And some of the best stories I've ever had are just being able to watch those games and being able to. I like to see the new guys because I haven't seen a lot of the new guys. Like, I'm looking forward to this weekend to be able to see the freshmen play in person. I haven't seen them play in person. Seen a lot of film, but I want to be able to evaluate those talents myself. But one night, Ty Lawson was just killing Wes Miller. There's nothing he could do, and so he started to do whatever he could as a competitor. He would pull his jersey, he would hold him, he would tug him, he'd just foul him, and of course there's no official. So I mean, it was just getting a little bit out of control, and finally he got tired. Um, Ty just got tired of him. So he's standing on the baseline to come set a down screen, and he just turns full two hands and just shoves Wes off of him and comes off the screen to the top of the key. And Wes, I mean, did what Wes would do. He trailed him off the screens and just full tackled him. I mean, football tackled him on the ground, and they just start going at it. And Deion Thompson is one of my favorite Carolina players of all time. He's just been very kind to me. We've done lunch a couple times, and he was on the court. I just remember him yelling, I love it," because of the competitiveness of what they had. But the point I wanted to make about that whole story was it was 30 seconds later. They separated them. They walked back to the exact same spot they started. They smack each other on the butt. You good? You good? Yup. Check ball, and they played. And I just thought that's what family is. It's not that family never fights. It's that when they do fight, they can forgive each other immediately and then right back to work. So that to me is very special. It didn't end the pickup for that night. We didn't have to separate them forever. I mean, it was just one of those moments where I know you're tired of me, I'm tired of you. All right, let's wrestle a little bit, and then we're right back into to playing again. So it is one of the coolest stories I have in the book.
Yeah, and those it's competitive. I mean, again, they're not playing just to mess around. They're out there trying to get better. And you mentioned the 10 o'clock games and the pickup games and all that. Yeah, there's a purpose. And if you've listened to this show and people have heard the stories, there's always that talk about a seat at the table. And the guys that have won national championships, they don't want to get shown up by guys that haven't. And you've got those battles constantly at the Summers at Carolina. And to your point earlier, it's changed a little bit these day and age, and it sort of ruined it for the old school folks like us. But still, the competitiveness is there. Um, Going through it some more, I want to talk a little bit about um, Eric Montross's camp. And Montross was a freshman, and they lived in Granville, and we all lived in Granville. And seeing those guys become what they do, but specifically Eric and the Father's Day camp. And I want you to just sort of talk about that a little bit because that's a big part of your book and it's an important part of your book. And everybody watching this understands that Eric has passed on, but the legacy he leaves, um, not only in his own life and with his own family, but this camp. Just sort of speak to that.
Yeah, Eric. Everybody felt like Eric was your best friend. He made everybody feel so welcome, and I got to know Eric through camp. Had Andrew Montross in my camp in my gym. That's how I ended up getting to know Eric. And when I moved to Tennessee, the gap, even though it's not that much bigger, trying to get home in between sessions was harder. And Ryan Riedel was the manager at the time, and he had started working camp with Montross, and he got me into camp, and I just volunteered. I was like, "Hey, I'll come and just I'm just looking for something to do in between the two Coach Williams camps," and that's how I ended getting into it. But to be able to spend Father's Day at that time, it's not, of course, we had to move it, but to spend Father's Day with fathers and sons and fathers and daughters playing basketball. My father passed away in 2012 from cancer, and it changed Father's Day for me. But I have 3 kids, and this is actually the first Father's Day I've been able to spend with them because I've been down at camp. But the Montross camp is obviously started because of his relationship with the Children's Hospital in Chapel Hill, and he met a young man when he was playing in the NBA, and they just kind of connected and hit it off. And he basically said, what can we do to make your stay at the hospital better? And the kid wrote pages of, hey, this is stuff that would really help while we're in the hospital. And Eric took that to heart, and he said, well, we're going to raise money, we're going to get that to happen for you. And it was um, you know video games and just ways to make kids comfortable while they're in the hospital battling cancer. And Eric raised, I think they've gone over, I don't know, 1.2, $1.3 million now in the years, because all the money that people spend to go to that camp, every dime goes to the hospital, goes to the cause. They have people that basically donate food, so all the meals are provided and things like that. So, and there's so many volunteers at the camp, and it's totally different than the Carolina basketball school. It's much more laid back. All the players are involved. The women's basketball team's involved. The men's basketball team's involved. So when you go to a station, I've run the defensive station. The last couple of years, I've had Seth Trimble as my guy to help. Before that, it was Creighton Lebo, and before that was Desmond Hubert. So you get to know these guys because they're hanging out with you, and you spend day and a half, 2 full days with them. So that's how I got to know a lot of the players, is just through Montross camp.
Yeah, that story I don't think I've ever told on this podcast is in the when I'm listening to you talk about your dad in the 2017 national championship. Me and my brother sat with my father in the hospital during that game, and he was out of it. He was not. He was with us, but he was not with us, and he is as diehard a Carolina guy as you could ever meet, and certainly instilled that in our family. But he passed away just a few minutes after Carolina won that national championship. So certainly understand the pull there of the Father's Day camp and what you mentioned about Father's Day. But yeah, Montrose, a pillar, an icon at Chapel Hill, and then that camp still lives on, and certainly the results of all the work you mentioned at the hospital, you can't overstate how important that stuff is for not only North Carolina, but the state of North Carolina and everybody involved. Again, talking about a great book, Bill Robinson's Carolina Basketball School book. Bill, I've been asking you to tell me stories that I've picked out. Tell me some that maybe that stick out to you that folks need to make sure they don't miss in here.
Well, I think my favorite stories are the ones of Porky and Coach Williams, and that personal relationship that they have. Because I want people to realize that Coach Williams is human. Because I think we put him on a pedestal so much, and kind of forget that um, he's the same guy now that he was when he was coaching Porky 50 years ago. They connected 50 years ago. But one of my favorite stories about their relationship was the snow day steaks. They got a snow day, and Porky's laying in bed. And what do you do as a high school kid during a snow day? You're excited. You get to sleep and not do anything. And your high school basketball coach calls you and says, "Hey, I'm making steaks. Get over here." And Porky's like, "Coach, it's snowing sideways. I mean, it's freezing cold out." He's like, "Get your coat on. Get over here." So Porky does what his coach tells him to do and gets his coat on and walks through the snow to get to Coach Williams' house. And Coach and Wanda were living in it was above a 2 bedroom or a 2 car garage. So you think about how big that apartment was. It was very, very small. And Porky walked up the stairs and walked in, and Coach Williams, I just picture him wrapped in a blanket, flipping steaks at the stove when Porky walked in, and he told him to sit down, and he served him some steaks. And Wanda walks out from the bedroom and says, "Porky, I married a crazy man." And they just giggled and sat there and ate steaks, on a snow day. Those are the type of stories, the personal stories that I just love. I think they're really, really cool. Um, I think one of the craziest stories was Hugh Donahue. There's a lot of stories about Huey in here. Huey ran his camp a little bit different, but he had a kid in his gym that had webbed feet, and he was told, not whatever you do not let the kid take his shoes off because he's got webbed feet. But he has every year would do a talent contest where the kids who who won would get 2 free milkshakes on Franklin Street. And when the kid found out about it, he whispered to Huey and said, I got web feet. He said, well, would you show him? He said, well, if you can make it 4 or 5 milkshakes, so all my buddies can get one, I'll show the web feet. And sure enough, he shows web feet. And it was just crazy stuff like this that you just would never think would happen at camp.
Yeah, and the cool thing about your book is you tell those stories, and you never think they would happen at camp, but also don't think people would talk about them or they would become public. And they're great stories, and that's why this book is a cool read for folks. If you're a Carolina basketball fan, it's definitely a must to get into. Um, let's sort of transition into now, and let's preview this camp. It starts. We're recording this on Wednesday the 18th. It starts on the 20th. The first session does. Just sort of, you mentioned earlier that it's different under Hubert. And of course, we're in a different day and age with college sports and college athletics. And like we talked about in the old school, guys were heavily involved. Guys, they ran the drills, they helped around the stuff. And I'm talking about former players and current players. But how has it changed, and sort of preview what's coming up here in a couple of days in Chapel Hill?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's changed with the NIL stuff is the guys used to get $60 a night to ref, for 2 hours. So you knew that, Ty Lawson. I have a story about Ty Lawson. Ty Lawson was in my gym, and he was my official. And got a chance to know him, and because of that, well, $60 to these guys now is nothing. A free meal in the Granville cafeteria. Nobody wants. They just go spend $20 at Chipotle. So we used to see those guys. We used to spend time with those guys. They used to be at the table, or we'd sit down with them and just eat meals with them. They're not there anymore because a free meal just doesn't mean anything anymore. And that's the thing I think is sad, because the funniest story I couldn't put in the book was a night I sat down with Tyler Hansbrough and a couple other good guys, and he was telling Surrey Wood stories at dinner, and got to see Tyler Hansbrough become a kid and just laughing hysterically and just letting his guard down and just being a college kid. And we just don't see that anymore. And I think that's the most disappointing. The time the guys walk through just to be able to sign autographs, and the kids kind of all jump in, but they really don't get a chance just to kind of hang out. And I think that's the thing that I miss the most. The other thing that has changed is the talent level has changed so much, because the AAU and the kids in the summer and the teams, they just the better players just don't come to camp anymore. You're not going to have a James Worthy, a Michael Jordan, those guys in camp anymore. Chris Paul, we had Chris Paul's son a couple years ago, so we still get to see those guys come around. But the talent level is just so different now than it used to be, and that's disappointing. I have recruited a couple kids. One did come and play for me from Carolina camp, but just the talent's not as good as it used to be.
Yeah, everything changes, and I feel like we're right in that sweet spot of we got to see, and I say you and I had got to see it how it was before, and now you sort of see the transition you mentioned. So, but it's still Carolina basketball school, and it's still absolutely worth going to. And we mentioned the Montross camp, and Bill, I want to give you an opportunity to sort of talk about a signing you've got coming up this weekend in Chapel Hill. And I'll throw this graphic up here. It's at Alumni Hall there on Franklin Street. An opportunity to meet Coach Robinson and also get the book signed. Just sort of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, I want people to understand that this is not. I'm not trying to become a bestseller. This is the first book signing I have had. I had one on campus just to kind of see what it was supposed to be all about. And it was the weekend of Helene and the big hurricane. So we had people come to the book signing just to plug in and get power, because they didn't have power at the house. I mean, that's kind of how it happened. But the book is self-published. I don't have a benefactor, so just nobody investing in my book. So this is something I'm just trying to figure it out. I honestly have no expectation of what this is about. I would love to sit down with people and talk about the book, obviously. But I'm really excited about it. Just contacted Alumni Hall in Chapel Hill and just said, hey, this is something that's going on. I'm going to be in town. Would you be interested? And they hit me right back and said, yeah, we'd love to sit down and talk about this and make it happen. So they were very, very helpful. And I'm looking forward to being there Saturday afternoon. If people are not familiar with camp, we work 3 hours in the morning and then have the afternoons off. And we can go play golf at Finley, and we can, take a nap or whatever we want to do. But I'm just going to take my afternoon on Saturday and go to Alumni Hall and hang out. So I'd love to talk to people about the book. I'd love to be able to sign books. It's an honor for me. I think it's really cool. I think they said the average self-published book sells about 200 lifetime, and I just hit 500 on Amazon and sold another 60 or 70 out of my office, out of the back of my car. I mean, that's kind of the way it's been. It's just kind of been a fun run, but it's been everything that I wanted it to be. I wanted to be able to hand Coach Williams a book. I wanted to be able to hand Hubert a book. I wanted to be able to give one to my mom. I was able to hand one to Ernie Johnson at the Final Four this year. I was able to get one to Jay Billis at the Final Four this year. And again, I'm not super aggressive in life. I don't necessarily, but just to be able to walk up and say, "Hey, Jay, here's a book. It's about Carolina basketball camp. I hope you enjoy it," and just walk away. But it's been everything that I wanted it to be. One of my former players, Tony Orr, does high level fundraising for the Boys and Girls Club. So he rubs elbows with some pretty important people. And he and Phil Ford have become really good friends. And he's been able to get into some circles that I would not be able to get into. And he bought 4 books and actually gave one to Michael Jordan. Now, Michael may have turned around and thrown it in the garbage. I don't know, but I know he at least had one in his hands. And for me, um, to be able to dedicate the book to my mom, to be able to give a book to Hubert, to give a book to Coach Williams, that's everything it's wanted me to be. And I'm good. I really am. I'm good, and I think this is a really cool thing. But I don't know where it's going to go. But right now, it's been everything I wanted it to be.
Absolutely. Like I said, I've read everything you can read. I've talked about it, talked to people. It's one of the better or one of the best books that I've read that tells stories that um, need airtime, for lack of a better way to put it, that need folks to understand and to get sort of insight on how this all works beyond what we see on television, beyond what we hear from the pundits and all. And you've done a good job or a great job doing that in a way, like I said, that it's an easy read. So it's not something that is a tough read, and that's what makes it cool because the stories just flow out there. Last question I've got for you, and I think it's one of the biggest, is the DES pin, and I wanted you to tell that story because those are not readily available. Let's put it that way, and just sort of speak to the pin and what the pin is and what the pin means to you.
Yeah, the DES pin, of course, is the Coach Smith pin that Hubert wears, and we advanced to the NAI national tournament. And at the time, that it was played in Sioux City, Sioux City, not Sioux City, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. So South Dakota is a long ways from Tennessee, East Tennessee, and ironically enough, it was my son's last college game, so it was an emotional weekend anyway. And we get ready to play, and we're playing um, let's see, it was right before um, Dante Calabria's team was playing, and knew Dante from camp, and Huey Donahue was his assistant at the time. So the way they work the tournament, you have kind of 2 locker rooms that are kind of together on one side and 2 locker rooms on the other side. But we were sharing the locker room area with them, with Kaiser and with Dante. So we were hanging out kind of together, and Dante was wearing the pin. And I said, "Oh man, I love that pin." And he looked at me dead serious and says, "Do you want one?" Well, yeah, of course I'd want one. There's no way I would be. Why would I be able to get one? But he said, I got an extra one if you want it. I'm like, well, yeah, sure. So here I am in South Dakota getting ready to play a national tournament game. And Dante goes back to the locker room and gets me a pin, and I was able to wear it that night. And of course, we don't wear suits and ties anymore. I still have the pin. I don't wear it very often, but it's one of my prized possessions. It's one of the things I think is the coolest thing because um, not being a Carolina alum, I'm never truly going to be in the circle. Um, I'm, I'm a stepchild. I'm happily a stepchild. And um, it's one of those things. It's kind of a cool feeling to be part of something bigger for a couple weeks, a summer, and I do. And it's Sully talks about it. Pat Sullivan. We got talking about it. It's at the very end of the book, and we were at the coaches party last summer, and he said, you are family. Even though you're not an alum and you didn't play here, but you are part of our family, and that was one of the most meaningful things for me. That and to find out that Coach Williams was happy about the book, um, and part of that conversation last summer, I had given him, excerpts of it. He read it. He said, I read every word. I loved it. It's my life, so of course I love it. and I don't really know if there's a market for it. And I said, Coach, I don't care if there's a market for it. That's not why I did this. I wanted people to know that this is a family. Camp is a family. Um, to have guys calling ahead of time and saying, "Hey, man, can't wait to see you," and that time we spend together, it's like a fraternity. And so we get together once a year. We get to hang out. We get to spend time together. We miss each other during the year. We don't really see each other. We talk, but it is a family, and it's no different. We get together. We love spending time together. There is some basketball involved, obviously. We're all basketball coaches and want to do a great job, but it's way more than that. I wanted people to know that it is special, and it is special to be part of the Carolina family.
Absolutely. The book is Carolina Basketball School History, Stories, and Drills by Bill Robinson. Bill, it's a pleasure to talk to you about it. You succinctly wrapped it up right there, talking about it. It is a game. It is more than a game, and Carolina Basketball School is more than just a summer camp. Go check out Bill at Alumni Hall Saturday, June 21st. If you're watching this before that, 2 to 4. If you're watching this after June the 1st or June the 21st, pick up the book at Amazon and other outlets. And I got my Kindle version, so I don't have a signed version, but maybe we'll have to figure that out this weekend. But Bill, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I appreciate you taking the time not only to do this, on a Wednesday morning when you're getting ready to head off to camp, but also for putting it together and spending, like you said, those 6-7 years compiling this and doing it in a way that folks like me that live some of those memories can read about them and see them. And I hope everybody feels the same. And man, I just appreciate talking to you.
Well, anytime. I've really enjoyed it. And anytime I get a chance to talk about Carolina basketball, it doesn't have to be about the book, but anytime we get a chance to talk about Carolina basketball, I just love to do it.
Well, we do appreciate it. Check out Bill's book. Check out Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Stay tuned for more coverage of everything Carolina basketball and Carolina Basketball School at InsideCarolina.com. Bill, it's a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Coach Bill Robinson and his time to talk about his labor of love. The book is Carolina Basketball School. There it is. History, Stories, and Drills. A ton of them in there, a ton of ones we talked about, but there's so much more that we did not talk to. Also, check out Bill at the book signing at Alumni Hall on June 21st, 2 to 4 p.m. there on Franklin Street, 133 West Franklin Street. Go in there and get your signed copy and just talk Carolina Basketball School and Carolina basketball in general with Coach Robinson. Appreciate everybody joining. Also, appreciate everybody taking time to go to Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. If you can't get there on Franklin Street, check them out. Get your quality gear, Carolina gear, anything you could possibly need at Johnny T-Shirt. They've got all the swag. They certainly got basketball, baseball, football swag, and it'll be football season before you know it. So load up when you have a chance. I'm Tommy Ashley. Shout out to Bill Robinson for joining me, and shout out to you for paying attention and watching. We'll see you again soon.